So let's talk about family curses, or curses as I call them. Now, one of the things that we consistently see is a trace of habits that happen throughout our lineages, throughout our families. Our grandfathers did it, our fathers did it, and in some cases we find ourselves doing it. And we we chalk it up to a family curse. And there are a lot of people who believe that since it's a family curse, it cannot be removed. But the truth is, the vast majority of these things are not actually family curses. They're just very bad family habits. I'll give you an example. Let's go a few years back, maybe a few decades back, even a few generations back, to your grandfather or your great grandfather. Let's say a family member does something traumatizing to your grandfather. His father perhaps beats him, abuses him, physically assaults him, and even maybe in worst case scenarios, he is even defiled. And so, what happens then is the person who physically hurt him does not apologize for any of those things, and as their way of coping with what they have done, they resort to alcohol and drinking to try and drown all of their memories and all of their sorrows. And most importantly, all of the guilt that they have from the things that they have done. And so what ends up happening is your grandfather grows up with all of this hatred and all of this anger and all of this distaste towards the world. And because he has no outlet and he does not possess the language to communicate his pain, he ends up drowning himself in alcohol as a way to sort of cope with the situation. And then when he has your father, he takes out his anger and his pain on your father unknowingly and ends up maybe physically hurting your father, abusing your father emotionally, mentally, spiritually, in whichever way you can think of, basically. And so that pain gets passed down from grandfather who received it first to your father, and then because your father also doesn't have the tools to deal with the pain because his father never gave him those tools and nobody in his society gave him the tools to deal with those things, what ends up happening is he passes on the exact same traumas to you. And what ends up happening is people look at the family lineage and they start to think that, oh, that's how these guys are. They are naturally abusive, they're naturally angry, they're short-tempered, that's who they are. And it ends up being labeled as a family curse, simply because so and so went through it, and passed it on to the next person, and now your father is passing it on to you. And the belief is that you might end up passing it on to your son. But the truth is, some of these so-called family curses are just habits and are just cycles that one person in the family refused to break, simply because either they did not have the information, the knowledge, the emotional IQ to deal with this situation and to deal with it in a healthy way, in such a way that he does not damage the next generation. They end up just pushing these things and kicking the can down the road. And that's why in our generation, whereby we have considerably more information than our parents had, it is to a very large extent our responsibility to break some of those cycles. And the only way to break some of those cycles is, one, you need to understand the root. You need to understand why. You need to understand what pushed this character and what pushed this narrative. Some of you were beaten in your families not because your parents wanted to beat you, but because they saw other parents beating their children, and they believed that that was the only strategy and that was the only way to get results out of their parenting. And you find that that beating may have not even resulted in the results that they wanted, but they did it because everybody else did it. And it was they were just victims of the times that they were in. And so your job today to break any of these family curses is, one, identify where they came from, identify the source, identify who hurt who. These might be very difficult conversations, but if you can have them, please do. And if you can have them with yourself, and if you can come to terms with what happened and let it go before you are in the exact same position your parents are in, i.e., before you have your own children, if you're able to let go of all of the trauma, of all of the hatred, of all of the bad things you feel like your parents did to you, if you're able to let go of that before you have children, you are more likely not to pass on some of those family curses to your kids, and you have the opportunity to break some of those cycles simply because you chose to understand the situation. You chose to learn why it happened, and you chose to forgive who it happened to, and you chose to forgive what they did to you, most importantly. And then typically what needs to happen after all of this, after the learning, the forgiving, the moving on, is you then need to build healthy coping mechanisms. You need to build healthy habits that step into the empty space that those old habits have left. Because if you don't build healthy, let's say healthy ways of disciplining your children, healthy ways of communicating, all of those bad habits will simply come back to try and refill the space that you pushed them out of. So have that in mind. When you take something out, be very, very keen to install something new and something better. Because if you don't do that, every single bullshit that you pushed out will simply find its way back in. If you're getting rid of a family curse, bring in a family blessing. I am Emma. Thank you for watching. To the next one. So that's my opinion. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments.